a little bit of information. This is the 99th happy hour that we've run since lockdown commenced, and we transferred all our in-person activities to virtual, and they have flourished over the years since. And we're really pleased that we've been able to maintain our virtual networks, as well as being able to continue to share and champion good practice from across the board. This session today, from a Scottish perspective, is no exception. It also coincides with International Day of Older Persons, but also importantly, it comes hot on the heels of Scottish Housing Day and a really vital conference that took place last week looking at accessibility, and a summit that was organised and hosted by Lorna and the team in Dundee, which you'll hear a little bit more about shortly. So again, some really important ways of how we can ensure that continuation of knowledge exchange and sharing of good practice, ideas and innovation. This afternoon's programme pulls together a number of projects, and the happy hours are funded by the UKRI, the United Kingdom Research and Innovation Team, and one of those projects is also partly funded by those, and we'll hear from Stephanie Sutherland after we hear from Lorna Cameron, the Chief Exec of Horizon Housing. She'll be followed by Stephanie from Blackwood Homes and Care, who in turn will be followed by Gary, who's the TAPPI project lead and does a lot of work around assistive technology, leading that programme for Bield Housing Association, and a late entry, and somebody who we met in Dundee last week, Rowena Statt, who has done a lot of work to really position the architect practice around age-friendly and looking at design quality aspects for our homes and communities. Before I pass over to Lorna, Lorna and I are also on the project board of the Inclusive Living Alliance, and she may draw attention to that, a project led by Vicky McCall at University of Stirling. And I'm delighted to say that we held the 2-year anniversary of the commencement of the ISPA project last week. So if you're not aware of the work that Vicky and the team and the partners are involved in, please do have a look at our website. We'll put a link in the box, but I'm sure Lorna will draw attention to a little bit of that and how that's really helped shape how we can build more inclusive and accessible environments going forward. But enough from me. I'm going to pass over to Lorna, and thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I will just quickly share my slides. If everybody can see that okay. Yep,
that's perfect.
So thank you very much. I'm going to quickly set my timer so that I don't talk on too long. As Jeremy said, we held a summit in Dundee last week, and part of that was very topical for today, showcasing innovation and good practice and thinking about accessible housing, and in particular the links with health and social care. So the background to it was, we at Horizon, we were delighted to be approached by the Scottish Housing News earlier in the year. They wanted to arrange their first summit at the V&A, Victoria and Albert Museum in Dundee, and they were going to do it originally on passive housing, but they asked, because we'd been doing some work with them, if we could do it together on accessible housing. So we absolutely jumped at the chance. I then contacted a number of colleagues and friends and new and old acquaintances to ask if they would participate, and all of them said yes very quickly. So we had a lot of speakers. We had a broad range of them sitting across 3 panels, and following the theme of widening perspectives for discussion on the day, we also had a range of attendees, so designers, construction, housing professionals, care, academia, colleagues, as Jeremy was saying, from Stirling University and others, third sector, estate agents and people with lived experience, so a broad range, and that was the point of it. So one of Rowena's colleagues, Alistair Blair, very kindly came and sat quietly at the back and sketched some comments from the discussion. So this was us at the beginning. We were all snugly fitted into the room at the V&A, and he's captured some of the discussions really well. The opening session, we had highlighted that Paul McLennan, the Scottish Housing Minister, was going to open the event. He unfortunately wasn't able to be there in person, so but he sent a video, so we were able to share that with the group, and then other panellists in that session, including Chris Bield, who's a Horizon board member. who just talked very passionately about the need for accessible housing and shared videos of some of our tenants and the often heartbreaking stories that they have of trying to get access to an accessible home and the challenges that they have living in a home that's not accessible. And we had other colleagues there too. So this was one of the discussion points in the opening sessions. Our previous report, Still Minding the Steps, said that 31,000 wheelchair users would in this year be waiting for a suitable home, and that would in fact be the equivalent of 2 football parks in Dundee, with another 5,000 people queuing outside. So just horrendous figures of people and demonstrating high levels of unmet need. We were also talking about housing as a human right and the whole the thoughtful effort and funding and creative designs, putting housing, social care, health, among others, in focus and placing housing right at the centre of local communities. There, Jeremy featured in the panel one discussion. So we looked at, I've mentioned the knowledge exchange there. I haven't mentioned the ISPAS project, but Jeremy also talked about TAPPI and the technology. So we heard about issues on older people from HAPPI Scotland, about government discussions around their policy of getting it right for everyone, and some of the rural challenges that Perth and Kinross face providing accessible homes and support to people who live in very remote and rural areas. So very good discussion there. Jeremy chaired that session, which was really good to bring everybody together. A couple of folks said, actually, I feel a bit of a fraud. I don't know enough about accessible housing, but that was the point, to get the discussions going and for them to share from their perspective. This is one of Jeremy's slides, but was reimagined by Alistair. So thinking about being bold and getting it right for everybody. So changing our images and thoughts about older people and thinking about the potential that people have to live well and at home in places of their choice. In the second panel, it was chaired by an MSP, Pam Duncan-Glancy, who's the only MSP who uses a wheelchair, and she's very passionate about this agenda. So we had this financial discussions there with the Scottish National Investment Bank, talking about what opportunities for investment they could bring to the discussions. Lots of tech opportunities through Alban Housing's work, and Lucy spoke very passionate about that. There was a lot of questions on that around what the potential was for supporting people at home and ethical considerations and so on. And then Christina, we heard from Christina at a recent HousingLIN session talking about the work that HAB and TAG have done with the London School of Economics around cost-benefit analysis. So some really interesting points there about prevention and early intervention. If you put the money up front, there are huge savings to be had later on, and not least for people themselves. So properly funded accessible homes at the beginning, and then that will reduce the need for lots of crisis intervention, including for health and social care at later stages. So a lot of good information there. And Christina also took the opportunity to promote her new their new design guide, which leaflets on which were shared on the day. So this was one of the images that Alistair created around a remote data system. So all the different technology that people can have in their homes to enable them to live there safely without, it's not intrusive. The system that's there and all the information that's generated is just for the individual and their families. It's not for wider use. In our final discussion panel, we then, Rowena's featuring there. Kate's just slightly out of, she was behind my face, I think. So in that one, we were talking about construction and design, so how accessible homes are good for everyone. And we heard Doogie talked about the Blackwood home that you're going to hear about from Stephanie. So sharing ideas and examples of beautiful housing and creative adaptations. We heard from Lorna and Invisible Creations, just lovely designs that just look good and make people feel so much better about where they live. We also, Kate talked quite a bit about new messaging around adaptations. People might be making certain developments and improvements in their home, but not wanting to call them adaptations. So there's an issue there about how we share that for future. And Olga was also just talking about some of the experiences and some of the changes that need to happen. She's from Dundee's perspective at the moment, but much wider than that. So a good discussion. There was a really good sharing of very creative designs there and great passion from this panel and from all the others. I'm just watching my time. My stopwatch is not actually working. I think I'm still okay.
Yeah, you've got plenty of time, Lorna.
All right, thank you. So again, this is one of Alistair's design drawings, just embedding accessible housing within great design thinking. So just all about the space that is used, the clever use of space, the use of outdoor space for people to be able to enjoy the outdoors privately. And this is one of Rowena's developments at Ganachie in Perth. You can sit outdoors, but within your own private space, but you can also sit outdoors and be sociable with others. So that was really really good to have that represented. And then again, just general acknowledgement. We know what good design is, and we should just share, as we're doing here and through other forums, share that practice and get it really on everyone's agenda, which was the part of the purpose of the day, getting health and social care to understand, as well as lots of other parts of the public system, equalities, public health, local government, to understand where they fit in to this important agenda. So the panel were asked at the end in a plenary how the day had galvanised the panel. So I think Rowena had mentioned about reinforcing the need for place-based approaches, local discussions and developments, and collaboration were very strong themes of the day. Jeremy had said about continuing a focus on human rights. It's been kind of pushed to the side a bit in Scotland, which is really disappointing. And also promoting the social model of disability. I mean, it astounds me that people still quote a medical model after all this time. So very much a focus on human rights, housing as a human right, and people being able to live well in their own homes. Future investment plans need to also think about refurbishment, so it's not all about new housing, and also thinking about designing for everyone. So some form of universal design, but thinking about all ages and stages of people's lives, and then keep sharing the learning as we're doing here. So I think Jeremy had mentioned about Scandinavia and in Wales, the Future Generation Act, but there are so many great examples of great work that is being done, and there's no reason why we can't promote that and galvanise it more, and then mobilise other people. So one of the areas was estate agents, and we had started to do some of that within our accessible housing network. Just thinking about what information is provided to people who are looking for an accessible home, and Right Move was given as an example. So some further actions, this has been suggested before, but some of us over 50 get a letter to ask about health check and for some cancer screenings when we're 50. So why do we not do that? Add a question in there about suitability of people's homes and people's housing needs. Certainly thinking about joining up funding streams, so the capital funding from housing and the revenue funding from health and social care. But it's not just about that. We need to think about other funding options, including with collaborating with the Scottish National Investment Bank, and strategically thinking, why on earth is housing not at the strategic integrated joint health boards with health and social care, instead of just adding on this ridiculous housing contribution statement at the end? It's just, after all this 10 years, I think, we're still doing this, so it just doesn't make any sense. And success through collaboration, it really is all about that for people, of all the people who were in the room and beyond, a whole mix of perspectives and a whole lot of very important contributions to be making, already being made, and actually that needs to continue. And somebody had mentioned during the day about, although we've got these very immediate housing emergencies and health and social care crises and so on, we actually do need to focus on the longer term. So what's the vision that the government and we all have for Scotland and beyond, and what's our plan to actually deliver that vision? So let's just stop getting lost in all the pressures and all the day-to-day and think, right, overall, we need to we're here now, and this is where we need to be in 5-10 years' time, and let's all sign up to that. So I think that's me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Lorna, I think what you've managed to cover there added with the illustrations that Alistair has provided, will enable all those people who weren't present to feel that they actually attended that event, because you've succinctly captured many of the key learning points and the points that were raised by all the panel speakers. So I think you've articulated those wonderfully. And thanks also for drawing attention to the work of your board member, Chris Baird. I thought he was inspirational as well. And we hope perhaps we can invite him to a future HousingLIN Happy Hour in due course, because it'd be lovely to get his perspectives, because he contributed wonderfully. But on that note, I'm going to pass over to Stephanie. And Stephanie, thanks, Matt. I know you're just back from leave. I didn't see you last week, but I had the privilege of going to Charleston and the scheme opening with a couple of the people there, a couple of people here. And you also kindly wrote a blog for the LIN to coincide with Scottish Housing Day, which gave a flavour of it. So looking forward to delving in a little bit further. So over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. Bear with me just a second while I share my screen. There we are. Are people able to see that? Perfect, before I battle on and speak too much. Thank you very much.
You may want to make it full screen.
Ah, okay.
If you're able to. Yeah, perfect.
There we are. Fantastic. Thank you very much to Jeremy and Sally, and thank you for everyone that's attended this afternoon. So I am Steph Sutherland. I'm the Development and Commercial Director with Blackwood Homes and Care, and I'm going to spend a brief 10 minutes talking about our development in Charleston in Dundee. So in particular, looking at the place, the people and the purpose that have made this development a success. So first of all, who are we? So Blackwood Homes and Care are a registered social landlord. We are also a care provider. We have over 1,700 homes in mainland Scotland, along with 3 residential care homes in Aberdeen, Stirling and Glasgow. We provide over 6,000 care at home hours per week across mainland Scotland. And we also have 191 customers who access care services through our digital platforms. And who are we to comment on any of this? I thought was an important point to touch on. First off, we know our customers. So we are just over 50 years old now. So just over 50 years of supporting people to live independently in whatever shape that takes for them. We also know the challenges that are facing the sector. So I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone on the session this afternoon that things are challenging. But, you know, as Lorna alluded to already, successes in collaboration, and hopefully in my kind of session, I can touch on how we've managed to bring different partners into this development to make it a success. And lastly, we know that our customer needs are changing, and also their expectations that social housing is not housing of last resort, that there is greater choice and control for all customers, especially customers who are looking for accessible accommodation, and our products and services need to change to reflect that. So Charleston itself is a development of 66 new accessible homes. It is a mix of 2-bed flatted accommodation as well as 4- and 5-bed townhouses. So a proportion of these are fully lift accessible also. So when we started designing out this, this development, working with Dundee City Council to understand their waiting lists, accessible larger family homes is a consistent pressure. So if you're looking for an accessible flatted property, they tend to come up fairly regularly. If you are looking for a family-sized home that's accessible, particularly people with children who have accessibility needs, these are families that end up on waiting lists for a long time. So that was a real driver for the councils to look at that and what accessibility in a larger property looked like. So just to add to the fun, these 66 properties are across 7 individual development sites within the Charleston community. They were formerly local authority owned tenemental stock. They were brought down in the early 90s and had essentially been gap sites ever since. It was a £17.5 million build contract with Campion Homes, who are a Fife-based contractor in Scotland who, yes, took on rather a challenging build in the throes of COVID. So did a lot of hard yards in getting us to where we are with this one. And lastly, as Jeremy mentioned, Charleston actually forms part of Peoplehood, which is a Blackwood UKRI funded project looking at products and services that can better support customers to live 5 additional healthy years in their own home. So thinking particularly about the place, the Blackwood house design has been commended by Inside Housing, is regularly mentioned as a slightly different model in terms of what accessible design can look like, and it has some very specific sort of cornerstones of that design. The first one is that it's affordable. So I think often when we speak about the affordable housing sector, we can miss that we mean affordable rent. So that the specification and the construction of these properties are designed to keep that rental level as affordable as possible for our customers. And that they're accessible. So they are fully wheelchair accessible in their current form. Wheelchair accessible as obviously the highest level of accessibility then means that they are accessible to almost everyone else. They are fully connected. We know living with a disability or a life-impacting condition, you're at greater risk of social isolation. So free at the point of use Wi-Fi is provided to all of our customers within this development. Also, and I'm sure we can say this because they're our properties, but they are beautiful. So this is something that comes up regularly, particularly when discussing accessible housing, that having a disability or having a condition that impacts your daily life doesn't mean that you necessarily want to live somewhere that looks like a care home or that has a sort of institutional design to it. One of the greatest reviews of these properties we ever get is that they are just beautiful properties. They're not beautiful, accessible properties or wheelchair properties. And that they're flexible so that they will suit a range of needs for a longer period of time. Speaking with customers, this is something that comes up a lot, particularly when customers are dealing with progressive conditions, that there is almost a transient sort of inevitability that this will be your home for a defined period of time, whereas the design of the Blackwood house is very much intended to be a home for as long as our customer chooses to live there. And lastly, that's the prevailing point for us, is that these properties are homes. They are a place that someone can call home for as long as they choose to. And thinking about the people that we've worked with on this development, you know, again, going back to Lorna's point around collaboration and particularly at the moment that is going to be the driver of success in this sector in challenging times, that we have had quite a few partners into this development that have really allowed it to be something more than it would have been if we'd simply delivered it alone. So first off, both Hillcrest Homes and Bield Housing and Care are working with us on the allocations of these properties. So what that means is that we are able to offer these properties to a wider tenant group than if it had been Blackwood allocating them alone. So Bield working specifically with older people, very pertinent for today, and Hillcrest with a consideration for more of a general needs tenant group also. UKRI, as we've mentioned, brought funding to the project through the Healthy Ageing Trailblazer, and along with that came 9 industry and academic partners into the mix as well, who have brought their own knowledge and expertise that have allowed us to design and test a variety of products and services to really understand what helps people to live more healthily at home for longer. And we, as Jeremy mentioned, we had the official opening of the Charleston development last week, and Angela Linton, the chief exec of Hillcrest Homes, said that these new homes represent more than just buildings. They're a testament to what can be achieved when organisations come together with a shared vision. And those were her words, we didn't give them to her, so that's even better. And lastly, thinking about the purpose, Blackwood has a very defined purpose, and you know, we help people to live their lives to the full. We help them to live independently in whatever that may mean for them. But actually, it was Chris Law, who is the Westminster MP for Dundee Central, who opened the development for us last week, and he spoke quite candidly about his personal experience. His mum suffered with MS when he was growing up, and they were actually Blackwood tenants at the time. So for this, I will hand over to him because I think he said it better than I probably ever could have. And he said, these properties don't just provide shelter, they offer independence, dignity, and a sense of home to those who need it most. This project in Dundee is not just about buildings, it's about transforming lives and communities. So I don't think I can say much better than that. So I will leave it there and say thank you very much for your time.
Well, Stephanie, thank you for making yourself available this afternoon as well after being away. I know I'm sure you've got a backlog of things to catch up on, but I think you've highlighted really well, how you have contributed to placemaking, building partnerships across the sectors, working with the council, and as Chris has highlighted, the achievements can be delivered. And I know he was both very passionate last week, but also asked some penetrating questions as well, which you and your colleagues were able to answer. I'm delighted that we've also managed to upload your blog in the chat box for people who aren't aware of it. What you don't touch on, I don't think I did hear, is about some of the earlier work you've done around clever clogs and things around technology. And the reason why I raised that, because our next speaker is Gary Baillie from Bield, and we got to know Gary through the TAPPI project, the sister paid program to HAPPI, the Housing Our Aging Population, to Technology for an Aging Population. And Gary has led and championed one of the 6 pilots that concluded earlier this year. And Gary's going to give us an update on that and progress that's been made since. So Gary, thanks again for joining us, and good to see you too.
Thanks very much, Jeremy, and afternoon, everyone. Please give me 2 quick seconds to share the screen. Perfect. Can everyone see that okay? Brilliant. So again, thanks, Jeremy, for having me along.
It's just there we are.
Oh, brilliant. So my name's Gary Baillie. I'm Head of Service for Bield Response 24 and Assistive Technology Development within Bield Housing and Care. And today I'm aiming to share with you Bield's journey with some projects that we've been doing around innovation. Jeremy touched on the TAPPI project, which I'll look into a bit more detail, and how we're shaping the future of our service offering as we explore the My Life, My Way, empowering independence for our tenants. But before I get started, let me introduce you to Bield Housing and Care. Interestingly, the name Bield originates from an old Scots word, keeping in with the theme there, that means a sheltered place. And it also features in a well-known poem by the famous Scottish poet Rabbie Burns, who once said, "Better a wee bush than nae Bield." But not dating quite as back as far as Rabbie Burns' era, Bield was formed in 1971 with the aim of developing safe and secure accommodation for older adults across Scotland. And we're a non-for-profit organisation, a Scottish charity, and a registered social landlord. We're one of the largest providers of housing and support services for older adults in Scotland, and the organisation has grown both in size and in the services offered it provided since the first house was developed and it was opened in Bo'ness in 1972. So currently we're providing housing services to over 6,000 tenants across 22 regions in Scotland, and provide over 3,000 care hours per week to tenants who are on a supported journey. Bield also have their in-house community alarm receiving centre, which not only supports our internal Bield tenants, but on average 18,000 citizens across Scotland. So firstly, why are we looking at change? Why are we looking at innovation and shaping the future? Well, through patterns of long life are marked by widespread inequality between our poorest and wealthiest communities, long-term demographic trends of increased life expectancies and falling birth rates mean that the proportion of non-working age people is rising and is projected to rise dramatically over the coming decades. Whilst I appreciate that we're looking at options now and how do we improve current services, it's also vital that we've got the future in mind and considering what services would you expect and what services would you like to see. The reason for this is by mid-2043, and that's within 2 decades, it's projected that 22.9% of the population will be of pensionable age, compared to 19% in mid-2018. Scotland's age structural shift is also projected to contain increasing numbers of people aged in the oldest age categories. The number of people aged 90 and over in Scotland is anticipated to double between 2019 and 2043. As the proportion of Scotland's pensionable age population grows, the proportions of both Scotland's working age and child population are projected to fall, And one implication of this projection is that a future Scotland may not have enough people of working age to replace those leaving the labour market as they grow older. And another implication, and more focused on for ourselves, is that without more working age people, the pressure on sustainability, tax revenues, public services, welfare, and most importantly, housing will increase. So at Bield, we recognise that we're facing a changing population landscape. There are now more than 1 million people over 65 in Scotland, with this figure predicted to rise by more than 300,000 over the next decade, and the demand for housing services, which, let's be honest, I don't need to tell anyone on this call, is already an undersupplied market. And that's expected to rise correspondingly or at a greater rate. Already, an estimated 22% of people over 75 live in social rented accommodation, against a background of falling rates of home ownership, and worryingly, fewer than half of Scotland's over 55s expecting their home to be suitable for them in later life. There are strong and clear indications of growing demand for housing services, and we recognise that a shift from standard reactive models to a more proactive and preventative model is needed to support shape our future with our tenants to ensure that we're equipped to order a modern, tailored and flexible service with a focus on ageing in place and independent living. So part of the project that shaped our future, and Jeremy, you touched on it, was the TAPPI project. And for those who may not be aware of what TAPPI is, TAPPI stands for the Technology for our Ageing Population Panel for Innovation. And it's a project that aims to improve the way technology is used in housing and care for older people. The project itself was led by HousingLIN and the Tech Services Association, and it was kindly funded by the Dunhill Medical Trust. And essentially, TAPPI seeks to address the opportunity that technology has to enhance the lives of our ageing population and the barriers that prevent its adoption. So Bield was fortunate to be one of Test 6 sites, and we were the only Scottish organisation to participate in the project. And for Bield, the goal of TAPPI was to develop new, scalable and financially viable housing service models that use technology to support personalised, choice-based approaches and ultimately deliver better outcomes for individuals. So how did we do this? At Bield, we focused on 3 key challenges during the TAPPI project: digital literacy, personalisation and promoting independence through co-producing an interactive tech hub, and also trialling the use of artificial intelligence technology to support independent living. Our aim was to leverage both tech, so technology-enabled care, and everyday consumer technology to support people understand how technology works, the role it can play, and essentially empower people to feel safer and live independently for longer. One of our major initiatives was the development of a tech hub at our Westport site in Lithgow. Now, this hub was co-designed with our tenants to showcase various technologies, again, both consumer and technology-enabled care tech, that can empower tenants to maintain their independence, feel secure in their homes, and live the life they want with the support they want. We also conducted a survey to gather insights from our tenants, our staff, our external partners on their views regarding digital technology and its role in preventative care. We had over 500 tenants participate and 90% of our workforce engaged, and that helped us identify and understand the digital barriers faced by our community and allow us to think and work with people to explore how can we support overcome these barriers and enhance our digital learning. And then additionally, we ran a trial using predictive and analytical AI sensor-based technology within our homes, just to test how preventative tech could be used. And essentially that goal was to measure the impact it could have on enhancing the quality of life of our tenants who are in receipt of care services, and also how the tech could improve the way our care services were tailored and delivered to everyone by utilising actual insights and data-driven decision-making. So part of TAPPI was co-designing a tech hub that offers people the opportunity to get hands-on with technology, ask questions and empower individuals to discover and embrace technology that could have a positive impact on their health, well-being, and potentially support with everyday tasks enabling independent living for longer. Some technology we had on offer include non-invasive full sensor technology, potentially allowing us to say goodbye to wearing pendants or using pull cords in our properties. And our tenants love to see items such as the robotic hoover, voice activated, easing some of those tedious housekeeping tasks that was becoming more and more challenging for them to do. The Tech Hub also showcased various smart devices, not to name any specific in case I accidentally set people's off in the background. As of April this year, in the space of a year, we've engaged with over 592 tenants, come to the Tech Hub and interact with the technology at hand. We've also engaged with 18 local health and social care partnerships with a view on how tech could, and in my opinion should, form part of care packages to enable and empower people to remain living independently at home. 13 housing associations, 4 third sector organisations and 5 international study visits have also been welcomed at the Tech Hub as we explore what our standard design and service offering could look like. So what's next for Bield? As we look to the future, we're focusing on several key areas that will allow us to continue evolving our services and better meet the needs of our tenants. And let's be honest, future tenants, which are us. First, we're enhancing our independent living offer. This means giving tenants more control, empowering them to make decisions and shape the way they live, ensuring their choices are respected and their needs are met. We're also working with technology to help people stay in their own homes for longer by embracing innovation through the Tech Hub and Virtual House. We're building confidence with digital technology, enabling independent living and providing the tools and resources that help our tenants feel safe, secure and in control of their own lives. And we'll make sure there's a link in the chat to the resources on the HousingLIN website as well for you. A critical piece of the strategy is understanding our wider workforce digital literacy. We can't assume that our workforce are digitally enabled or confident with tech, and we want to build on the knowledge and lived experience of our own workforce so that we're better equipped to support our tenants with the technology that's becoming increasingly more part of their lives. We're also committed to shifting the culture. The role of housing in the wider public sector is changing, a topic Lorna touched on earlier. And at Bield, we're focusing on connecting the dots between housing, health and social care. And our focus is on looking to champion personalisation and ensuring that independent living is achievable for everyone. And finally, we're developing our design brief. We've just heard from Stephanie around the adaptable homes in Charleston, and at Bield we're working to ensure that our homes are adaptable and future-proofed as the needs of our tenants change over time. We want to make sure that our homes can change with them, providing safe and comfortable living environments, no matter the circumstances. So what does that all mean? So at Bield, we understand that everyone's unique, with different needs and aspirations. And with this in mind, we've co-created with our tenants our new independent living offer, and our commitment is to support our tenants in living the life they choose. And this includes, but is by no means limited to, providing housing that can adapt with minimum to no disruption to meet changing needs, whether through home adaptations or access to assistive living tech. But it's also important to note that technology has to be the right technology for each individual, and that approach will be taken in the form of the right tech at the right time, hopefully preventing tech being placed in the drawer and forgotten about, which we've seen in the past. We want to ensure we're offering advice and support to help tenants access right financial services when they need them the most. And we're exploring how environmental technology can monitor to mitigate the risk of fuel poverty, for example, and alert our income maximisation officers to proactively have a conversation and engage with tenants to ensure they can afford to heat their home and they've got access to the appropriate benefits. We want to be assisting in accessing health and social care services within the local community, ensuring that the service has tenants connected where appropriate, and creating opportunities for tenants to live the life they want, whether that's being involved in a community volunteering or simply pursuing their personal interests. And we want to ensure that tenants are fully involved in making decisions that impact their lives. So our aim is to help everyone feel empowered, valued, and feeling that their unique needs are met. This in turn will support our tenants to lead the life they want with the support they need to make it happen. And finally, just before I conclude, I just want to take a moment to highlight the core reason behind our efforts to make a positive impact, and that's our tenants. This is a short video. It was created by our tenants themselves who consent to it being used, and it just reminds us of what truly matters. putting the tenant at the heart of the conversation. And just before I hit play, I just want to thank you for your time today. And let's take a moment to reflect back on the voices of those we strive to do better for. But apologies, there is no sound. I did have technical issues. Again, thanks very much. And Jeremy, I'll hand back over to yourself.
Gary, thanks. And again, some very powerful messages from the video, but also thanks for articulating so clearly both the work that you're doing, but also how that is grounded in your corporate vision and what that means for residents and your partners as well. I was struck by a lot of the things that you said initially around the ageing demographic of Scotland, and that echoed some of the points that Catherine Crawford and Jackie Pepper both talked about at the summit last week. But also that sort of transformation around looking at system and service architecture. We're going to move on, though, to build on that, to look at both the social architecture, but importantly, the physical architecture as well. And that's because we're joined by Rowena Statt from Anderson Bell Christie Architects. And this is a last-minute entry, but somebody who I met last week, and also was very inspired by what she was saying. So without further ado, Rowena, over to you.
Thank you very much for letting me have a chance to speak. I've got quite a brief presentation. I'm an architect. I'm also a member of the board for Horizon Housing Association, and I'm a member of Lorna's accessible housing network. So what I've done really is try to choose a few projects that don't just demonstrate the architecture, but start to look at the approach and the direction of travel that we share with the conclusions of the Accessible Housing Summit. So I think I'm kind of reflecting and expanding on something that one of the previous speakers said. We're looking at housing that's more than it would have been if we'd been working by ourselves. So I've highlighted 3 projects. The first one here is a project we completed for the Ganachie Trust. The Ganachie Trust are a big fundraising organisation set up by the whiskey millionaire A.J. Bell in the round about 1900. They own an estate in Perthshire in Scotland. They've already constructed in the 1920s some fabulous housing, and we had an opportunity to add to their estate. So our client, really, the Ganachie Trust, had a very clear idea of the kind of thing they wanted to do. They wanted exemplar housing. They wanted exemplar housing that was social housing, and they wanted something that would influence perhaps the way other people were building, but they weren't very sure what they wanted or how to get it. So we worked with them really to develop a brief to get a clear idea of socially what kind of things they wanted to achieve, as well as just the architecture. And the result was a lifetime neighbourhood, an idea that we picked up from some previous documents quite a wee while ago. But a lifetime neighbourhood to us was a neighbourhood where you have old and new people living together, where we've got an intergenerational neighbourhood, housing that suits a wide range of people, from starter families through people with disabilities to people that are old who are downsizing, where we can support people ageing in place. We've got a real emphasis on green space in this project. We've been involved with previous research with the University of Edinburgh, where we really dug down into the relationship between people that are older and green space, discovering the ways in which it helps people de-stress, how it helps people's mobility, how it helps to keep people young. So it was a very, very important part of what we were doing. So we didn't just design nice green streets and spaces. We incorporated what we called a situtory, which is the image in the bottom right-hand corner there, into the bottom of into the entrance of everybody's houses. This was a covered area, a bit like a veranda, where you had an opportunity to sit outside, chat across to your neighbours, just enjoy the view, but you would be outdoors, you would feel very protected. So that's something that worked very, very well for us during lockdown. When we went round the estate, it was amazing. We had every kind of garden furniture from B&Q sitting out there. Everybody uses those spaces and personalises them, which is fabulous. The bottom left-hand image there shows a house that we designed partly as a slightly larger property to act as a wayfinding thing for people perhaps with dementia or visual impairment, but also for families who had a disabled family member, because, you know, as we've already found out, these types of homes are very few and far between. So we really wanted to make sure that we incorporated them. So what we were aiming at really here was a lifetime neighbourhood in the true sense, in the sense of bringing together people of different ages and then helping people as they aged to stay in place and enjoy the environment that they're living in. Now, I don't know quite how to share, move on to the next. Oh, done it. Our second project that I wanted to highlight is Crevel Court in Alexandria. We had a similar agenda to the previous project. This one, I would say the last project really was about partnership working and how we got to turn an exemplar product working in partnership with the Ganachie Trust. Crevel Court is really, I think, much more about inclusion. We worked with Western Bartonshire Council on this social housing project again, more houses for low cost rent. But our focus this time was on how do we design these properties for people as they age? How do we design them to be dementia friendly? And how do we design homes in the middle of a busy town that are going to suit people as they get older? Because there's huge advantages in living in the centre of a town in terms of ideas about 20 minutes neighbourhoods, active travel, moving around, having services close to you, maintaining sociability. There's lots and lots of good things, but at the same time, you have to start to try and balance that against the need for safety and security. And I think we achieved that here. We designed flats with larger windows and fantastic levels of daylight. We color-coded the different stories so that if you had dementia, it would be easier to work out where you were. We had house plans that gave you views through the houses. And then at the back of that flatted development, we had a lovely community garden and bungalows for people who were perhaps a little bit more able. But the net result was really to include these people and make them feel part of an existing community in an urban location, in a place where it's very easy to make people excluded and stigmatized because they're older. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. And the final slide here is really, I think the theme for this one is communication. This is our inclusive community project. It's something we're at an early stage with the Capability Scotland. For this project, we were working with a group of 60 people who are in existing residential accommodation in Perth. These people have been there really, some of them since the 1980s. So we're not really designing a care home as such. We are designing a large home, a co-housing project, as it were, for a group of people who have very profound and significant physical and cognitive disabilities. In terms of their disabilities, we need to add on the fact that they're aging, that they were in a very isolated site. The accommodation that they'd had was state of the art in the 1970s, but things have moved on since then. So again, if we wanted an exemplar approach for this, how did we do it? There's lots of legislation and guidance about designing for people with disabilities, but it tends to be very, very kind of practically based. There's an awful lot about going to the toilet and not very much about what actually people like to do, what suits them, how do they want to spend their time, what do they want to do during the day. And this was a real issue for us because quite a lot of the clients that we had in this development were non-verbal, in a wheelchair. So how did we find out what they wanted their home to be like? So my colleagues, Caroline and Alistair, who did those lovely images that you saw earlier, set up a communication strategy with Capability Scotland. They used a wide range of techniques to communicate as effectively as they could with people. That included computer-assisted technology, sign language, storyboards, observation days, a mock-up of a studio bedroom suite, and contact with staff and families. And at the end of the process, they had a brief that they had developed that captured not just the physical requirements of these people, but their social, perceptual, and emotional needs in a way that gave us the beginning of a way to design something that was really distinctive and unique for them. So Capability Scotland and Anderson Bell Christie are using this brief now to develop our inclusive community project. And it's still at really quite an early design stage, but it is moving on. So to conclude, I think for us, it's not just about the architecture, although it is very important. It's about partnership working, good communication, and shared aims and inclusivity.
Rowena, thanks very much. I think that's a really draws together, I think, all the messages we've been able to share this afternoon. And the fact that you talked about lifetime neighbourhoods, dovetails with Steph's peoplehood, technology, relates back to the sort of digital infrastructure and our broader architecture. It's just a tool to enable people to participate and collaborate more effectively. So thanks very much. We've got a few minutes for Q&A. I think we've got one or two in the box, and I'm going to come to those. I think, Gary, first one is a question for you. Did the tenants who visited the Bield digital hub go on to purchase any products themselves, or were they provided or funded with any others by the organisation?
Great question. We are aware of a few tenants that have went on to purchase some devices, such as I'll call it an Alex device in case it does go off in the background for anyone. What we tended to find, though, it was more family that have been engaged, that have bought the digital devices to support their loved ones at home, and spend time showcasing how to use those. In terms of the technology-enabled care devices, we unfortunately can't provide all tech. As a non-for-profit organisation, we don't have that ability, and we're trying to partnership with the local authorities to look at how we can incorporate tech into care packages, and showcase a cost-based savings analysis. And there's a few case studies we're about to launch on some findings that we've had. One of them where the predictive and analytical technologies has prevented UTIs, or not prevented, but it's had early detection of UTIs for one of our tenants. And that's got ahead of the game and had that proactive intervention, which has again saved the wider health and public purse string. So we're looking at that return on investment piece.
Thanks for that. We've had a question in from Emma. I'm not sure whether that's aimed at you, but Gary. But I'm going to actually broaden it out to Steph and Rowena. What kind of features did you incorporate into the properties that make them mobility friendly? So perhaps just let's broaden it out. Look more generally. Rowena, if I kick off with you, you started talking about lifetime homes.
Well, we were very fortunate with the Ganachie Trust. We designed bungalows, which is something that quite a lot of our clients really feel they can't do because they are expensive. The bungalows, we just made sure that all of our space standards and the spaces in the houses were very suitable for wheelchair users, so that they could just move in with a minimum of adaptations. And one of the houses, it was quite nice recently. A young guy, about 21, has moved into one of the houses. He was really just able to move out of his mother's house and into the bungalow, just like anybody else would, really. There wasn't, it was, I think the process was great for him, as well as the end result. And I think generally what we try to do with most properties is widen out what we're doing from the physicality of designing the right size of toilet to making windows bigger so we know they've got better daylighting, making sure that things are easy to navigate, trying to build in areas where people can socialize, making people feel safe. I think there's a whole wide range of things that we need to consider as designers, apart from just the actual dimensions of the building.
And Steph, you talked about sort of like the work in the kitchens and the work of laminate and others, and there were a number of features that I really liked. Do you want to just sort of expand on some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So particularly with a focus on the kitchen, rise and fall worktops, also rise and fall upper wall units. So actually that come down, again, fantastic for wheelchair users, but actually have a wide range of applications beyond that. I think a couple of key other features from the Blackwood House perspective are doors being pocket doors rather than standard leaf doors. So they can be either manually operated or automatically operated, but it means you can make better use of space rather than incorporating the swing of a leaf door if you are a wheelchair user, which can be awkward. And actually following on from Rowena's point about sort of safety and helping customers to feel safer, all of our properties will have a video door entry as standard, which does link into our digitally enabled care system. So essentially, if you are spending time in one particular room, if you're spending time in bed, you can see who's at your front door and open your door from there, rather than your staff or friends and family needing to be key holders necessarily. And probably the last thing from the Blackwood House perspective is all of our properties are heated through underfloor heating. So again, removing radiators and making better use of that circulation space, particularly for people using wheelchairs.
And that links again to some of the things Gary is teasing out around fuel poverty and energy efficiency. I think in your slide, Lorna, you've listened to this. The conference was a great success. Are there any other things that you think, both at national policy, things like the accessibility standards for varying needs, for example, or you as an organisation that want to take forward? I know that you have a chair who's an OT, and again, I think you've answered one of the questions in the book. Are there any things about the adaptability of our buildings as well as the new build?
Yeah, I think the review or the consultation was concluded last year on the updating the housing for varying need guidelines, and there were so many different perspectives and so many comments on the technical design, but also the broader things, some of which have been discussed today. So I don't know when they're going to become available. I think one of the things that Rowena and I have talked about is just some of the planning arrangements, trying to do what England has done and streamline some of the processes. It's quite complicated to find your way around some of the planning processes. So I think in the review of the housing for varying need, that all needs to be considered. And the stage one of the review, which wasn't included, which is all about supporting people with care, all that needs to be looked at. So I think just for us all to keep continuing these discussions, and I saw a comment there about, all the great work, and that's right, that everybody can go away and share what's going on. And that was the purpose of the Accessible Housing Network. Everybody's welcome to join that. We meet online and people bring different pieces of work, and we sponsor pieces of research and so on. And it really is just to broaden the discussions beyond the housing colleagues and sector, just to get other people, because as Rowena and Steph and Gary have said, there's so many other great things going on here that we need to actually all know and understand how we fit in and how we can develop those in our own organisations.
Well, thank you all four of you for really making the time available to join us for our 99th Happy Hour. I hope that we can repeat this with you early next year. I think it's been a really great way for the LIN to showcase good practice, innovation and ideas, and put the spotlight on what's happening in Scotland. We do that through our Happy Hour series right throughout the year. In fact, later next month, we're doing a similar programme looking at what's happening in Wales. And Lorna, you touched on some of that in your presentation as well. There isn't a Happy Hour next week. We're having a short break, but please do join us for our 100th Happy Hour, when we are being joined by Lord Best, who chaired the All-Party Parliamentary Group inquiry on regenerating outdated sheltered housing. So if any of you are interested about managing existing stock, about reproviding, refurbishing, decommissioning or change of use, we're going to be looking at that and how a number of operators and commissioners are thinking about future use of sheltered housing for the 21st century. But all that leaves me to say is thanks again for all the presentations. As Sally has mentioned in the chat, the slides, the recording, the chat will all be available later this week. And I thank Sally and the team behind the scenes for making this run so smoothly. And I look forward to you joining us at a future event. Thanks, everybody. Oh, perhaps I should just add, please do complete the feedback forms. That really is helpful. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Bye.
Thanks, Sally. Bye.